Hello, my friends. John LaRuffa here with another episode of Solo and Sold It. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about games that I'm really just ready to sell, like about to sell. And most of these games are actually really good, but they've either I've played them enough or there's something about the solo mode that just leaves me in a lurch, or there's one that's not very good at all from a solo standpoint. But what I always try to do with these is tell you why I'm parting with them so that you can understand them. And that doesn't mean that necessarily all these are bad or whatever. They need to go one way or another. But as you can see, my collection is getting pretty mature and pretty large, so I have to make some tough decisions, and here are 5 of them. All right, so the first one was not a tough decision. I actually recently posted a solo review of this game, and that one is Age of Inventors. Now, this game, multiplayer, I'm sure, is very good. I'm sure it is fun. I'm sure it is challenging. I'm sure it's interesting, but the solo mode wasn't even half-baked. In fact, it wasn't even put into the oven. They basically said set up 3 little spots to act as some scoring competition in the 3 places you mainly score, and then knock yourself out with the rest. I don't even know. I feel like I was bamboozled into thinking this game had a solo mode. It's a beat your own score without any stratification or anything like that. I really haven't. I really can't understand why they did it. I almost felt a little cheated, which is why I gave it a pretty negative solo review. Multiplayer-wise, I could totally see why this game would be great because of its potential cutthroat nature and because of the kinds of efficiency decisions you're making. But Age of Inventors, I think, from a solo standpoint, is one that you need to avoid, plain and simple. All right, so second one I'm going to talk about is actually a pretty good game. I just don't think it's for me. And I think it's because I've played games similar to it enough that I played it a couple times and it was fine, solo or otherwise, but it was a little bit fiddly and just not too enjoyable because of all my previous experience in games like this, and that is raising robots. Now, this game is a pretty good game. There's no doubt about it. I've just played so many games of this type for so many years that it can't stay in my collection because my collection is just too full. So I still think there's a great experience in here from a solo standpoint. It is a beat your own score, but if I remember correctly, they do give you some stratification as to what a good score is. But there's a lot of replay value in there. There's a lot of different cards. There's a lot of different things you can explore. I think it's a very good game for those who haven't played tons and tons of Wingspan or other Tableau style builders like that. And I knew that going in, and I played it a couple times and I enjoyed it, but ultimately it's got to go. All right, the next one here is Mercurial. So Mercurial is another game that's not bad at all. In fact, it's really pretty decent, especially when you mix in the Challengers expansion, but it's just not a good enough experience for me to keep long term. This is another game where had I not played as many games like it with regards to, reusing your cards and kind of trying to get combos together and such and so forth, I still think I would be enjoying it, but it just didn't bring me back to the table with some serious excitement as I was hoping it would. Now, the Challengers expansion did bring it up a notch, and I reviewed it pretty positively based on that. And I still think it's good, and I think a lot of people out there would actually like it. It's not a standout enough for me to continue with it in my collection. All right, now this one really is a frustrator. And it's frustrating because I really think this is a great game. But to try to play it solo is so difficult. Let me just show you which one it is. Merv. Merv is a very good game. And if I had a group that played it multiplayer often, I would never part with this. Although I don't play it multiplayer often, I'd have to relearn the entire thing for multiplayer whenever it happened. And it was a fun experience when I finally could wrap my mind around the solo, but it was so hard and the climb was so difficult to get there that ultimately I've got to part with it. And the reason being is because it has one of the things that I just do not like when it comes to solo mechanisms. And that is trying to simulate a 3-player game with a solo bot and then a lesser solo bot or something else that stands in and then you. And that game has already got so much to bake your brain with because you have so few actions and so much riding on those actions and everything else that to try to figure out the multitude of priorities, prioritize this, then that, then this, and if it's this kid, then that, and then that, and then this, and it was just like, ooh. So I really wanted to learn it again, and I went through that, and all of a sudden it all rushed back on me like, oh my gosh, this is such a chore to figure out how to play multiplayer because you have the rules of the game, then you have the priorities of the main bot, then you have the sub-priorities of the other bot. And it's just too bad. And it's too bad because it's a fantastic game, but it is not one that I will ever play again because I'll never learn and I'll never keep my proficiency up enough with that type of game and with that game specifically to be able to enjoy it without putting in hours of work just to struggle through the game, get exhausted, finish it, and then be like, okay, well, I finally understand it, but now I'm so tired, I'm not sure I really want to play it again right away, and then I'll be lost. So that type of and I want to say this. First of all, it is not a right that I should demand all these games have solo. This is a blessing, okay? I fully admit that. The fact that there are so many board games out there that have solo modes, it's a blessing. And I do not want to dog on Merv at all for being a bad game because I think it's a great game. It's just got too difficult of a solo mode for me to figure out. But that is not the fault of the designer. That's just what it takes to play that type of game. And I do applaud the designer for putting in a solo mode that would make it possible should I have the constitution to stick it out. This time I don't. And actually I had rated that game very high. I never actually reviewed it on my channel because I think I got so exhausted. I wasn't never really sure I was doing it right. And that was also another thing that was challenging is that with all the prioritizations and everything else, I couldn't even bring myself to post a video because I thought I would be lambasted for all the mistakes I could possibly make. Oh, you forgot this priority. You didn't do this priority. But again, I am not making a critique of what that designer had to do to provide that solo experience. I appreciate what he did. I just... There is a cap on everybody, right? And I just couldn't keep that in my brain. I'd have to play it weekly. Heck, I'd have to play it a couple times a week to keep myself to the point of being able to handle it. And the other thing is, too, because there's those two alternating priorities, I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I feel like I have to flush it out. It's not like you could just play for what is the best way that the AI would make its best turn. Because sometimes I find I do that in games that have a lot of prioritizations. I figure out what's going on and why they make choices. And then I'm like, okay, I can sort of play it from their angle now and I don't have to worry about the nuances, everything else. I couldn't quite get there in that game because you had, the vizier and then you had the other guy and then you had you. It was just too difficult to figure out who does what now and how does it interact and they don't obey the same rules. So again, I like Merv a lot. I'll be happy to play it with someone else who knows how to play it and who will be, if I ever get to play multiplayer with that kind of situation. Okay, and then my final one. And then I always try to have one that's a little bit controversial, so to speak. And I would consider this one controversial because this is praised by many as the best game in the series of the pandemic games, and that is the Pandemic Iberia game. Now, the only reason I'm letting this go is because I have proven to myself that I'm not really going to pick it up. I have played it. I played it like the day or two after I bought it. It was good, but I've played so much Pandemic in my life, especially going through Pandemic Season 0, 1, and 2, having the app, playing the original game, having Pandemic the Cure, having the one about the flooding, the high tide. I've just got so much Pandemic, I just don't think I'll ever really get this off the shelf and it's taking up space. But that is a good game. It's just, I think, a pandemic out, so to speak, over the last, how many have they been out? They've been out for, well, almost 18 years, 17 years at the time of this. I think the first one came out in 2007 or 2008, 16, 17 years. Either way, lots of Pandemic, and that's a good game. It really is. And it can be played solo very well. It's not overcomplicated. It just does not fit with where I am and where I see myself going in the future in regards to my collection. So thanks again for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope this was informative. And as I always say, whatever you decide to do in the future, I really hope you have a fantastic time doing it. Take it easy, everybody.